Okay, let's get rolling here. We want to welcome our audience back to our third podcast on footprints in the sand here in Spokane, people that made a difference in the sport of distance running. We started this in November, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Oregon's National Cross Country Championship team. 33% of that team was Spokane guys. Randy James, Ferris High School grad, me, myself, Coach Tyson, who of course was a transplant, came in, but I worked at Mead High School and now at Gonzaga University. Our second guest was, one of the legends of high school running in America, former record holder for 2 miles, 8:48, was Rick Riley, again, Ferris graduate. But now we are really pleased to honor our guest today, Tracy Walters. We have his son here too, Kelly. He'll be helping me in navigating through this hour and celebrating the life and times of Tracy Walters, the history. Before we start here, I just wanted to say, Tracy is a young 91. Mm-hmm. He's actually sacrificing a little bit of Valentine's Day today. It is Valentine's when we're filming this, and left his wife home, but he'll be back. So, but again, we want to thank you, Tracy, and
thanks, Pat,
and your son Kelly for being here. And Kelly again will be helping me through these few minutes here. Let's just start. And Kelly, please help me here. But your dad, 91. Let's get back to when you remember him, some of the history of him. Maybe we just have him start talking. But
yeah, for the history, I think what's really interesting is because he's legendary here at this time, of course, in Spokane for his influence in distance running, and at one time across the world, really. But it started in a very interesting way because he was not a track guy, not a cross country guy, but actually a ball sport guy. And played baseball, loved baseball early in his years. And then I think it'd be a great place to start. And basketball was part of a state championship, the first North Central State Championship team.
For a long while.
He was on that team when he was a junior in high school and played basketball. And then he played football and played baseball. Mm-hmm. And the story could have never started with distance running. But tell them, we were just talking about this at breakfast yesterday. Tell them the kind of the story of how you got into doing track.
And Tracy, this is like, you graduated from high school at North Central what year?
49.
Okay, so that gives us a little reference point here of the era. So take it over.
Well, I played football and I ran. My Curly Barnes, the coach, he kept saying when I was a freshman, sophomore, junior, come on out
for track.
Well, I'm not going to come out for track. He was the head track coach. But my senior year, I was a little disappointed because one of the best ball players in the city got cut by the coach.
For baseball.
And it really bothered me. I mean, he was a hell of a lot better than I was. And I thought I was pretty good. Well, I made the team and he didn't. So I figured if that coach doesn't know any better than that, I don't need him. So I quit. And then Curly Barnes came out and says, come on out for track. We got an intramural thing going on. And I said, what's intramural? Well, we're competing against the other classes in the school. And so I did. And
you started out with running the 100.
Well, I ran the 100 and I got beat by 3 guys. So, I could make the team, but not verily. And then the next thing was a 200 and I got beat by 1 guy. And the next thing was a 400 and I won it. And I couldn't understand why these guys weren't running faster.
And then you ran the 800.
And then I ran the 800, and I did really well. And then it was time for the mile the next day. And I didn't know what was going on. I'm out there all by myself. There's nobody around. And I'm not even tired. And so I figured maybe the last 200 yards I just ought to get going. And I finished and looked, nobody was there. And I thought they were pulling my leg. And they weren't. I apparently had a talent that I didn't know about.
Yep.
Thanks to the baseball story,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
You were what, 16, 17?
He was a senior.
Senior. You were senior.
Turned out for the first time for track.
My senior year. Yeah.
And then you turned out, and what and how did you do in your senior year? Turned out the first time.
Well, I did pretty well. I won the city championship and went down to state, and I thought maybe I might place. And I think they gave the first three guys got medals, and I was, I think, fifth. So I didn't, but I won maybe almost 15 seconds faster than I'd run the previous week. And so.
How did that time fit for the city? Was that the city record at the time?
That's city
so
record.
Your senior year, first year, all city school record, and then you went down to Pullman, Washington when they had the state meet there. And you got fifth.
I got fifth, yeah.
And ran 4:33.
Yeah, a whole lot faster than I ever run before. But I was really disappointed because I thought maybe I might get a medal.
And so what happens? You graduate, and what happens next?
Well, I was going to go out to Eastern anyway, and I love basketball. Our team had won the state championship that I'd played on in 48, and so I thought I'd go out to Eastern and play basketball. And the coach told me early on that he was the basketball and the track coach. He says
Red Reese.
Red Reese, and he's a terrific coach. But so he said, "Hey, we're not interested in you in basketball. We would like to have you try out for track and see what you can do." Boy, that was that disappointing because I wanted to be on the basketball team. So, and then he says, "Well, I'll make it easy for you. You can be my official at the with all the charts and all the stuff that we do and keeping track of the score and that kind of thing. You can do that." Well, that's better than nothing. But I was terribly disappointed because I'm a basketball player.
Yeah.
And he says, "No, you're not. You're a runner." So he was the track coach too.
For those in the audience, Reese Arena Court over at Cheney on the Eastern campus, named in honor of him. That's pretty cool that you knew him.
Yeah, and he was really kind to me. I mean, he liked what I did. And he liked the scorekeeping that I did for the basketball team.
So then
one time we were over in Montana, and a couple of our guys were in real foul trouble. And he says, "Tracy, go get a uni on." I didn't have to play, but I came close.
You were ready.
Yeah, I was ready.
So what about your track career at Eastern?
Well, I turned out, and I still was more interested in baseball, basketball, and everything else, and less interested in running. But Reese made it very clear that he was a track coach and that I was going to be turning out for track. So I did. And I did pretty well. I did quite well. I mean, well enough that I made it to the Nationals.
So your junior year,
you
made it to Nationals, and I think you won the did you set a record your junior year for the
locally? Yeah, but
for the conference?
And Xavier Montez won the meet down there
in Texas.
And I found out how little I knew about running. He says, "What kind of ladders do you do?" "Ladders? What kind of intervals do you do?" I run to the point of exhaustion. I didn't know what he's talking about. I had no idea. And I figured if I ever coach, I'm going to find out what's going on. And so that was kind of my introduction to coaching, too.
And so in the Nationals, you got fifth?
I got fifth, yeah.
And ran 4:17.
4:17.
That had to be a record at Eastern, I would think.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. And then tell them about your training, typical training, as opposed to Montez. What was the typical training at that time?
Well, after I'd heard
in
about
1952,
ladders, and I'd heard about intervals and all that kind of stuff. And so what my training was, I'd go out between the goalposts and run to another goalpost, come back to this one, run to the goalpost and back, and take a shower. That was how you trained for running the distance races. And I didn't know. I had no idea until I met Xavier Montez, who won the meet down there in Abilene, Texas.
So that was his junior year. Senior year?
Yeah. Senior year was a
I was training. I figured out what to do, and I was really training. And I think I was in great shape. First meet, I got beat. And I got beat by a guy from Whitman, and he won the Nationals.
Wow.
And then soon after that...
He beat me by a foot or two, but he beat me.
Soon after that, you sprained your ankle.
I tried to do a flip in the gym and sprained my ankle, and that was
really bad.
Done for the year.
Yeah.
And so this was very fortuitous too, which is very interesting. You probably don't know Pat. So senior year, he gets hurt. He's not able to compete. But he's on the track team still. And at that time, you were married, had
Well, we had
Mark, maybe
We had
a baby.
Mark,
Was
yeah.
living in a place called Trailerville
out on Cheney campus.
with
Okay.
other married couples, and they did a special at Eastern Magazine a few years ago, which is fascinating. But anyway, so now he can't compete, but he had been around the team and was a leader, and and then
Well, Reese was having some trouble academically with
administration or
the
something.
administration.
So he got
And
like
so
suspended for
He
something.
couldn't be there, so I was coach.
Oh, wow.
I was
So as a
coaching
senior,
Student coach.
yes,
student coach.
he
yeah.
became
and I thought
the de facto coach.
I did dang well.
So that was your beginning.
That was kind of my introduction to coaching. Yeah.
Can you take us, from there into your student teaching and forward from there?
Well, there was nothing significant at student teaching. I did it on the campus, and
Okay, I
Eastern.
thought maybe you when you went to public schools that you would be in a.
I think it's your first teaching experience. So you got your first
Okay.
job at Endicott,
yeah, at Endicott.
Oh, at Endicott.
and
I
was
was
there
teaching everything.
for a couple years, maybe.
Science and math and algebra and geometry and trigonometry.
You were happy to have a job.
Yeah.
Well, and I was coaching.
And coached
I was
everything.
coaching baseball. and so I decided to start a track program.
At
And I got some of these-
Endicott.
At Endicott. I got some of these baseball players to run, and they ran well. We did pretty well. We won the Colfax championship.
Let everybody know the student body population of Endicott at that time. I mean, small now, don't get me wrong.
Oh,
Maybe 100?
I doubt that we were 100. I think we were under 100.
Yeah. So no wonder you had to recruit,
Yeah.
just everybody in
Well,
the hall.
my pitcher became my half miler.
There you
He
go.
was Boyd Swint, and he was a brilliant pitcher. He pitched for Washington State.
So what year were you at Endicott, or years?
Well, let's see. Had to be, oh boy, it's racing back.
Just a few years.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, quite a.
Because
Quite a few.
when did you
This
come
was-
to
Had to go ahead.
when did you come to Spokane Public Schools?
I was down there for 4 years,
Okay.
and then they said that there was an opening at Rogers High School,
Okay.
and I met Tuffy Ellingson, and that's an experience in itself. Brilliant guy, has his grade book in his belt, but brilliant.
And what year was that?
Well, I came in 54.
Okay.
Or 57.
What?
I think you might.
1954.
Okay.
First year at Rogers.
Okay.
And then
And you wanted to coach track when you came to Rogers. I mean, you really wanted
Well,
that
no,
job.
I came that to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
was
Fred
Jack
Brown
was
is
Jack
the-
Newberry there then?
Jack Murrayberry had gone to Washington State,
Okay.
and he had only been down there a year or two from Rogers. And I really liked the guy, and I thought the world of him. And so it was kind of an easy fit.
So you took over for him at Rogers.
Well, no, he'd left.
Okay.
And then I think Fred Brown, the football coach, had the team for 1 year, and then I took over in 1954.
So 54. And so how'd it go those first few years? Okay, you're building something.
Oh, boy. We were tremendous. We won the city championship year after year after year after year after year. In fact, I think in 10 years, we lost 2 or maybe 3 track meets.
Yeah, I just actually looked it up, and I think there may have been at least in something I read, maybe 4, but in the 10 dual
10 year
in 10
period.
years of dual meets.
Yeah.
So there may have been 4 dual meets that he lost.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? It had to be, I mean, your energy, your excitement to recruit and
Well, it was kind of a perfect time. At that time, the railroad was going, and Kaiser was hot, and my parents were just so cooperative. In fact, they'd say things now that I guess is okay on the air, but they says, if my kid does anything, paddle him, and when he gets home, I'll paddle him again.
that was the Hellier neighborhood.
And everybody had a paddle. And I thought, I'm never going to use a paddle. If I have to use a paddle, I don't belong in the classroom.
So what about when cross country started? I think the first state meet was about 1959. That's what I remember. That Frank Knott from Mead High School had won that first title.
Sure.
Well, what about you in cross country? You started the program at
You
Rogers.
started a
Yeah.
cross country
Yeah.
program, and
we
your
had
first in the beginning, or was there a program beforehand? Before that?
No, they had a program.
Okay. And they hadn't been successful. They hadn't won anything,
They
right?
had never won a meet.
And so,
And the coach told me, well, Tuffy Ellingson, he says, don't worry about cross country. We've never won a meet. And I figure that will change. I don't know how long, but that will change. First year, didn't win a meet. And then we started winning, and then I had Len Long and Jerry Lindgren and all these kids coming in, and a lot of kids coming out. We had to sometimes get 2 buses to go to a meet
for cross country. And for track, I think before we get into individuals and some of that success, but I think how many kids were coming out for track and in the heyday with Rogers track?
Well, you mean when Lindgren and those guys were...
Yeah, after you built up the program, how many kids did you have turning out?
Oh, I think we had 30, 40 kids.
When you started?
No.
You're talking about cross. You're talking about cross country.
Cross country.
But how many on the track team?
Oh, I imagine we had 100.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And
Maybe more than that.
Tracy,
I got pictures.
Tracy, it's easy for me to figure out why you did it, but the audience, me, want to say, tell us some advice on how you did that. I mean, your energy. It had to be your energy, your excitement.
I think it's more than that. Love for kids, love for competition, a desire to see these Rogers kids have some success. They were doing well in football. Tuffy Ellingson had the football team going good. But other than that, with Jim Forsyth in baseball, they were doing fairly well. But track was an afterthought.
So tell us a little bit about this young man, Jerry Lindgren. I mean, very few of us really know. From the start, I mean, tell us a little bit how he got involved in the program, how you got him out, and kind of the evolution.
Well, we had hardly anybody coming out, and I put a notice in the bulletin that we're going to have a cross-country workout. Nobody showed up. But over at junior high, the coach there had suggested that there were several kids, including a kid by the name of Len Long and a kid by the name of Jerry Lindgren, that we don't have any race over 660, but I think he's got some talent. In fact, I think both of them have some talent. So I went over to junior high and recruited them, and recruited a bunch of other kids too. And then I went around to the classroom whenever I could and talked to the kids.
So those guys were ninth graders.
Yeah.
Because you were a 3-year high school then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then then this must have been about the fall of 1962.
Right.
Yeah.
Or no, Lindgren
61.
61.
Yeah, fall of 61.
Because he was 64.
He's a little freshman, a real little freshman. Tell us about this beginning, the roots of Lindgren and Len Long and your crew.
Well, everybody around in the Rogers area said, there's some kid that's running all the time. He delivers our paper, and he's running, and he runs with the papers, and when he gets done, he runs faster, and he runs down Wellesley, and he goes down Crestline, and everywhere he goes, he runs. I said, wow, what's his name? His name is Jerry Lindgren. I think I need to talk to him.
Yes.
And then I met him, and he had this big, tall, 6'3" guy, Len Long. They were buddies. And what a combination those two were. And the thing about Jerry that I think is not only worth talking about, but I didn't realize how bright he was. He was a bright kid. And a lot of people thought, well, at Rogers, he's not very smart. But he was absolutely, his SAT scores were brilliant.
Good to know. A lot of people don't know that part.
And a lot of people misled Jerry, thinking he wasn't very bright. So what did he major in at Washington State University? Foreign languages, wow. Russian, Japanese. And he speaks fluent Russian and Japanese right now, today. He calls me up on the phone, mushy mushy. That's hello on the telephone in Japanese.
And so
tell about
go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking that his first year. So at the very beginning, was he outstanding? Was he very beginning? Or in junior high had he been really good? Was he a superstar?
The longest race was a 660.
Right.
At the coach over there thought maybe he might be able to be a pretty good distance runner.
Yeah.
And so the first race, he just took off like crazy. He's 50, 60 yards ahead of everybody.
And this is in cross country?
In cross country.
And the distance then was like 2 miles?
2 miles, yeah. And he did pretty well, but he kind of faded toward the end.
They caught him and passed him.
They passed him. I said, Jerry, he says, I know, I did crappy. No, you didn't do crappy. You did great. But you got to tone it down a little bit to start with. He never did tone it down. The next race, he just got further before he collapsed.
Well, and tell him about, because I think this is really fascinating. People would like to hear this. As you saw that he had some talent, he had courage, and he was just learning how to run. You kind of challenged him. I mean, this is something you've talked about a lot, and he's talked about. You challenged him about kind of the limits of human performance. Like, what would it be? How people limit themselves. And they put boundaries and they go only so far because they're afraid of pushing past those limits, and how you challenged him even in that first year, because he would go a little bit further each time. And do you remember that kind of your challenge to him of like, what would happen if you were to keep pushing yourself?
Well, I don't remember the details really, but I do remember that I said, Jerry, you might be able to extend that because there's some evidence that if you can continue to do that for a longer period of time, and I think that was the key for him. He just went out and ran the hills around Rogers and dynamite up the hill.
Did you ever have to kind of control him a little bit?
Without a doubt. If you'd just pulled the leash off, he would have. I think he would have. He got hurt a few times. He got for the Olympics on a couple of occasions. He got injured, ran into a car and hurt the car.
How did he do as a sophomore in cross country and in on the track?
He did well, particularly in cross country.
Was he the city champion?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Was he second in state his sophomore year?
His sophomore. Well, a guy who won that thing.
I think the guy
Robinson
from Shadle Park.
From Shadle Park won it. Lindgren was second.
So here's this little sophomore guy, and here you are out at Endicott, up to Rogers, and you got this program you started, had nobody out.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, you didn't even probably know. You knew you had somebody pretty darn good, but take us through the next 2 years here as a junior and as a senior.
Well, the interesting thing that Jerry and I talked about a lot, he would run and blow everybody away with a tremendous time, and I was so excited. And he would say, "That's crappy. I can do."
Did
better.
he really use those words?
Yeah, crappy. I can do better than that. and that was kind of his philosophy. He got more of a thrill out of the competition and the strategy than he did over winning. Winning, no biggie. But the strategy and doing these unusual things and being different, that was important to him.
So he started to run away from people. I mean, he started to be superior and running a level that people hadn't seen before. So I'm not sure if it was his junior or senior year. I think it's a great story at Green Lake. So the state race was once around the lake.
The lake, yeah.
There was no flags
in
so to
Seattle.
Speak. In Seattle,
yeah.
Once around the lake. And you head in one direction, you come back.
Out of the brush comes Lindgren. And somebody says, he must have cuffed the course. I say, he doesn't even know how to swim.
Yeah, there you go.
So he's so far ahead that people thought there was some mistake.
That he couldn't.
And he was, his junior, I'm not sure about his junior year, but it's certainly senior year. He was running regularly with the 2-mile courses. Mm-hmm. He was running under 9 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Always.
And the national record, I'm not sure what it was exactly at the time. Well, actually, there wasn't a high. They weren't running the 2-mile normally. I think in scholastic competitions or across the nation, but the national record, whatever it was probably barely under 9, or maybe wasn't even under 9. But he was running cross country races under 9,
a hair over 9.
Okay,
but it might have been a hair under 9. Yeah.
So, can you tell us a little bit about? Can we nail down any kind of workouts that you gave him on the track that you can remember, or is this? Or was Jerry just a little? You gave him a long leash and he just took off.
No. We did repeat. In fact, we had a workout that I kind of liked. The kids would run a 400 and take a jog lap, run an 800 jog lap, 3/4 mile jog lap, mile jog lap, and then back down to 100. And it was kind of a neat workout, and Jerry would just go wide open, and then interesting thing about it, then the last thing we would do is usually take a little break, which we didn't. We took no breaks at all, but take a little break, and then he would run a 400. Wide open. He'd be lucky to be under 60.
Right.
He just wasn't very fast.
So as far as the progression, I've just kind of moved this along. The progression, so in cross country, he's blown everybody, wins the state, running incredible times, but they're not on a track. That junior year in track, he comes out and he's running some great times, and then he gets a stress fracture and can't run most of the season, and literally he's on crutches.
He's out for most of the season.
Yeah, almost the entire season.
He has one meet before
state
to qualify for state.
And that would be the city championships?
Probably.
Yeah.
Just gets off crutches. He was literally training on crutches, doing intervals on crutches. And so he finally gets the clearance to get off the crutches and to run. And he qualifies for state, goes to state, and wins it, correct?
Wins it.
In a time of probably 4:20 or something, not phenomenal.
Wasn't that bad,
but then he goes down there, and then there was an invitational meet down in Oregon, correct? With Tracy Smith and some other great runners who would run some great times.
Yeah, Tracy was, I think, the national record holder in the mile, and my recollection.
I think that's right.
Came out of California.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they had this race down there when he was a junior. So he goes down there and again with just very, very little training. And do you remember the time? I'm pretty sure he ran 4:11.
I think that's right. I think that's correct.
So off that small window.
And he won it.
Yeah, won this race with Tracy Smith. It was just an incredible duel.
And that's when I realized how incredibly gifted he is.
So
Take a kid that good and beat him.
After that 4:11 in Oregon, was that the end of that season? Now we get ready for cross?
Pretty much the end, yeah.
Yeah. So we enter this
Senior.
amazing, crazy senior year, the fall of 63, and of course all through this year of 64. What's going on over at Rogers, over in the Hilliard neighborhood?
Everybody loves Jerry. And Len. I mean, there's a lot of other people there that were a factor in terms of that time.
And so
And
even
Len
that
was good.
Even that fall, and I was 3 years old, so I don't remember being there. But seeing some videos and so forth, there'd be sometimes several thousand people coming to cross country meets to watch Jerry, because it was so phenomenal. It was just out of this world. So
Huge crowd.
So he goes through, runs away with the state meet, and
At Green Lake.
And the second guy, the second place guy at state, was a minute back, and that was his teammate Len Long.
Yeah.
And they win the state meet, setting a state record for the lowest number of points.
For the lowest number. I think we were 23, 24.
For scoring 4 at the time,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think they scored 4 at the time, rather than 5.
So all that, he's running great times, running 8:50 and so forth at cross country meets for 2 miles. But again, all of it off the radar and off the national radar. So locally and in the Northwest, people knew there was something amazing.
Something crazy out here.
And so then he gets invited down, and maybe you remember how he got invited, but he got invited down to a
Track and Field News invited him.
Okay.
Can you tell us how they found out about him? I mean, was there somebody in the Northwest or I mean, of course he won that mile the previous summer.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. And then I coordinated the Nelsons.
Oh yes, Corner Nelson, Track and Field News.
Yeah, I wrote a letter.
Okay, you promoted him.
Yeah, well, I just said this guy's pretty darn good.
So he ran. So the first race, I think, was a invitational high school 2 mile to run against a pretty good guy from Kansas named Jim Ryan, who was a junior. And Jim Ryan was already legendary.
Already held a state or the national record.
Yeah, at that point. And so they ran at this duel, and it was really these two guys.
Well, there were some other pretty good runners in there, but the two of them were.
Yeah.
And then he tripped.
Ryan did.
And went down. And when he was in Spokane, I maybe you were there. I said, but Jerry tripped me. I said, yeah, I told him to do that.
So the national indoor 2-mile record was I'm thinking it was like 9:23.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And so Jerry runs this race with Ryan there and other great runners, and runs 9 flat.
Mm-hmm. And breaks the record by. Well, this is kind of a cute story too. You'll appreciate it. So he wins this trophy. I mean, there were collegiate athletes who were prepared and capable and made the Olympic team, and he won the trophy. And the trophy was almost bigger than Jerry.
I was going to say, you probably had to carry it out for him. You know.
So it was really late when the meet was over. So we went to Lowe's for a meal. And Jerry is sharp as can be, but he's also fun. And he says, Coach, can I have a filet mignon?
Okay.
And I said, sure, Jerry. And the waiter came over with his tuxedo on. Sir, can I help you? Yeah, I would want one of them there filet mignons. And the waiter went nuts. He couldn't handle it. I said, Jerry, cool it. I wanted to give him something to think about. He says, well, I'm going to like my filet.
Was this in San Francisco or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that winter, there were several other meets, and I think this is really, this is just again in the context. The high school record been 9:23, just ran 9 flat.
Might add, by the way, for the audience, that most of these arenas were filled up with 10,000 people running those 11 laps per mile. Plywood
on plywood boards, not the Mondo
bank tracks,
hydraulic tracks.
Yeah, right.
Yes, and so then they had asked him, the organizers of the meet asked him, "What do you think?" Asked Dad, "What do you think Jerry could run?" And as I recall, you said, "I think he could probably run 8:45 or something," which they didn't believe. He just smashed this.
He says, "You know what the record is?" I can't remember now what it was, but incredibly higher.
Yeah, and so then he got into another meet, and he ran 8:45.
Yeah,
was that the one in the Cow Palace?
I think it was.
Yeah.
There was another one after that, so
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so then a few weeks later, there was an opportunity to run against Ron Clarke, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be at the Cow Palace in San
Yes,
Francisco.
and that was a big thing. And so now, and the world record at the time was probably in the, I want to say 37 or something. The world
close
indoor 2-mile record, and again on 11 laps a mile on a plywood board track.
And Ron Clarke was
the record holder
from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Many times a record holder, not just in
almost
2 miles indoors.
In every distance event.
He was the man on earth.
The best on the earth.
Nobody could touch Ron Clarke.
So you have this little guy.
Untouchable.
You have this little guy.
Little, tiny guy.
That you brought down to the Bay Area.
This monster with a packed crowd. I think there must have been 19,000 people.
So
there.
what are you doing when this is happening? Can you share your
Well, I run down there reading lap times to Jerry. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of funny because the Stanford coaches were sitting right by where Lita was. And Jerry's out, bing, boom, boom.
He takes off from the beginning.
He just took off
takes off leading.
like crazy. And everybody's cheering and they're up. And the Stanford coaches says, that little kid's lost it. He's going to lose it. He's going to fall right off the track. He's going to die. And Lita turned around and says, I'll have you know, he runs like that all the time.
And so he proceeds to take on the best runner in the world and push the pace and lead him lap after lap after lap.
And is this like winter, like February?
Probably.
We have really nice...
Like end of March. I mean, the end of...
February.
End of winter.
I didn't think it was... Yeah. I thought it was more like January.
Okay.
Yeah, but the point is, we know what the winters are like here in Spokane. So this guy wasn't... You know how kids say, man, we don't have San Diego weather, or what's going on in Spokane? How can Spokane runners do so well despite our weather, right?
Because they run.
Yeah.
So he's in the race, and they're coming down towards the end, and Lindgren is leading the best guy in the world. Then do you remember what happens? I mean, just in general, does he fall apart? Does he quit? Does he?
Clarke takes over, and Lindgren comes right back, takes over with about a lap to go. And everybody's, all 19,000 are on their feet. And around he goes, and he wins it. And I'm announcing on radio.
Oh, wow.
And
No, actually I think you're
am I a game ahead?
you're combining a couple
Okay.
stories. So
Go ahead.
so in that race you're there, and so Clarke ends up pulling away at the very end, out kicks Lindgren.
Close race.
And
Close
Lindgren
race.
runs 8:40 flat.
Yeah.
And in for the sake of any fans around following distance running for the years and years and years, I think it was Cheserick about when he was in high school back 10 years ago or something, when he finally ran an indoor time, barely beat that time on a modern track with modern spikes and everything else. And so that time, if you think about it, especially in the context of taking on the best guy of the world as this unknown little high school kid and coming close to beating him, and then running 8:40 is, to me, there's nothing that's been done like that.
And here it is, winter. It's a senior year, and now you're going to take us through the spring and what's happening next.
And the summer, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 1964.
Everything was hard to believe, because I really, at that point, I wasn't sure how good Jerry was. I know he was brilliant, but how good was he? Could he make the Olympic team? Oh, there's no way a high school kid can make the Olympic
Never
team.
been done.
Never been done. Wouldn't even, and yet I kept thinking to myself, maybe. Jerry, I said, what do you think? Coach, I think maybe. So he believed that he could make the Olympic team out of high school.
For the audience, we're talking about an era of Bill Dillinger and Bob Schul and Billy Mills and others. I mean, I'm leaving a lot of Oregonians out of there that were in there. So here's this little guy, the Spokane. What was his nickname?
Jogging Jerry.
Okay, Jogging Jerry.
And the Sparrow.
And the Sparrow, Spokane Sparrow.
Yeah.
How much do you weigh?
Oh, he might have weighed 115.
Okay, and how tall?
Oh, he's probably about 5'6", I imagine.
Okay, so here you go. It's here, Coach Walters, out of Endicott / North Central, Eastern Washington, man, former baseball player. And you got this,
Not Cooper Cup.
not Cooper Cup. I'm glad you brought his name up. So let's go, baby. Let's talk about this
see what
story now.
happens.
This is crazy.
So in the summer he had ran the logical thing was a 5,000, and then somebody one of the national coaches or
Sam Bell
tell about, so he thought that Lindgren may have a better chance
at the
in
10.
the 10,000.
Rather than
And
5.
Sam Bell, for the audience, he coached at Indiana. Prior to that, Oregon State. Legendary coach. Coached a guy named Bob Kennedy.
Yeah.
So he recommended this.
Yeah, and he thought, well, they had nobody for the Russian-American meet in the 10 except maybe Jerry.
Had Jerry run a 10 before that day?
One.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they go into the Russian-American meet. So Jerry's entered into the 10,000, running for the U.S. And at that time, the time of the Cold War, the context is, all the political implications of the two systems and the Cold War and the rivalry. So, and track being a big...
And a couple of pretty good guys with Ivanov and Dudov.
Yes. And so picture in the Los Angeles Coliseum, the meet's held, and there's 60,000 people.
And there was one famous political figure there from America. Who was that?
Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy's brother, who would later run, was running for the 68 nomination for the presidency before he got assassinated.
Attorney General of the United States at the time.
So he's there, but it's a huge deal because of the rivalry, and the Soviet Union had been very, very good in track, and the U.S. had been pretty good in track. And so one of the first events, I think it was a 2-day meet, and so one of the first events was the 10,000. And so Lindgren's running against the number 2 and the number 3. There's Ron Clarke, who's the best runner in the world. World record holder.
Ivanov and Dudov.
Those are the two. So the two Russians
Dudov and Ivanov
were the next best.
Yeah.
And there were some things before they were asked about Lindgren, about how they were going to...
You don't want to send your boy against those giants.
Yes. And so they dismissed him, that he's running against man.
Is this like in June?
Yeah.
And so, because the Olympics would be going on later on, but okay, so here we are in the Coliseum, and here's this barely 18-year-old kid
running against two of the best in the world.
And you're there, and what, does this kid ever have any fear?
not only did he not have fear, he had a strategy as to what he was going to do.
That he came up with. So talk
And
about
so-
the pattern that was it Nelson or who was it or Sam Bell, somebody who had studied their lap times and what the Russians like to do.
Yeah. At any rate, and they like to go at a steady pace and then put in a fast lap.
About 4 miles.
And maybe do 2 or 3 of those
Surges.
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 Contact laps.
Like maybe
Contact
400-meter surges.
And this
Yes.
is where we leave you. And Jerry says, that's cool. You know what would really be neat, Coach? Is I could pretend it was really hurting me when they start the fast lap, and I could even breathe deep. And then when they can't see me coming, I'll do my fast lap.
Uh-huh.
And so they run the race. They're going out at a pretty tough pace, and Lindgren's with them.
Yeah.
And they hit that point. He might have even gone to the lead for a while or something, but they hit that point about 4.5 miles. And so they put in at that time, maybe they're running
Maybe 4 or 5 seconds faster.
70s or something.
Yeah.
And so they put in a 65 or 63. Yeah. And Lindgren.
And Jerry drops back about 10, maybe 12, 15 yards. And he looked like he was dying, just dying. And the Russians were talking with the coaches to the kids. And so Jerry says, I want to make my move. When they go, I'm going to make my move on the curve so they can't see me coming. And I got a picture over there of, I think it was Ivanov.
And tell him what Jerry's thought was about how, no matter how tired I am, I may be dying. I may not finish the race.
Yes.
But I'm at least going to.
Doesn't matter.
I'm going to put everything
make it
into this lap after this surge. So.
We're going to get that picture up for you, and then we'll tell the story.
So they run that lap, and then he's tired, and he's fading a little bit, and then he just goes all out and puts his own
fast lap
in.
And look at the.
There we go.
And so he passes them and blows by him.
And we got another picture where it shows him going by and the Russians going.
And so he builds 10 yards on one of the Russians, and the other one literally about another lap left. He quit.
Yeah, he
quit the race.
He was way out of it.
He dropped out. And so then Lindgren was tired. It was hot, but the crowd's rising
on their feet, and there was 90,000 people there. And in fact, I got pictures of the stands when he finished and waved.
Was it an era of victory laps? Could he go around and
they were doing that?
Okay, so
Jerry did it in spades.
Yeah. So Jerry, what was his reaction? What did he tell you after the race, or do you remember any of the details?
Well, we had Bert and Cordner Nelson had a little bit of a luncheon, and so they introduced some other guys that had done well. The United States was doing well, and they said, "Jerry, would you come up?" Well, everybody stood.
Wow.
And Jerry's nodding to them, and they're all clapping. And Cordner Nelson, I think, said, "Jerry, what went through your mind prior to the race?" "Mr. Nelson, I looked down at the peristyle end of the Coliseum, and I saw the American flag and I saw the Russian flag. The Russians in terms of their totalitarianism, and with all our faults, the hope for freedom. And I just wanted to try to do my best." I cried. And a lot of other people cried too. How can a 17, 18-year-old kid put it together any better than that? Even with all our problems, we have a freedom.
And then what happens in Spokane when you guys come back to Spokane, the town, what was it like?
Well, it's euphoric. Mm-hmm. I think euphoric's a good word. It just.
Well, and again in context, because it was such a big deal. We wouldn't see this now in a dual meet, but it was such a big deal, symbolically, politically, for the Russian and Americans, and this being one of the first race. Yeah. And so this is a picture you should get. This was out of Sports Illustrated, and so they did a full spread on this, because not only did he win this race, but everybody rose to their feet. Bobby Kennedy reportedly in the article said that he was in tears.
Yeah.
It was such an inspirational moment for this high school, this little squeaky voice high school kid to beat the two of the best in the world. And then the rest of the meet, inspired like this, the U.S. just went on a roll and just had an incredible meet. Dominated and ran away with the meet. So now it was on the Wide World of Sports. It was the spread in Sports Illustrated. So now everybody knows Jerry Lindgren. And now the Olympic trials is coming up.
And to lead us into that, because we only have a few more minutes left here, this looks like it could be a 2-part series here. But so the impact we said was amazing. And now we go off to the Olympic trials. The Olympics are going to be in Tokyo. Where's our trials?
Trials in L.A.
At Coliseum?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Back to the Coliseum.
Coliseum.
Remember, he's not even gone to college yet. Okay?
And here's Billy Mills in the race, And Jerry had beaten Billy every time he ran against him. And so Jerry says, I want to do some half laps rather than full lap, fast laps. I'm going to do half fast laps. But I'm going to do twice as many. So he would run 200 meters and slow it down, run another 200 meters, speed it up. And, of course, pretty soon, Clarke, who else was in there?
I don't know if Tom Laris and some of those.
Tom Laris was in it. Brown was in it. Billy Mills was in it. And Jerry had broken away from everybody but Billy, and then he does another fast lap. Billy Mills is gone. Jerry's way ahead of him. So that was
paid off.
So now he's heading to the Olympics. He's beaten Billy Mills by a long ways. He's was close to Ron Clarke in the indoor 2 mile.
Can I also mention one more time? This is 3 years after he ran the 660 at the junior high school in Spokane, Washington,
which was the longest race they had.
So he goes into Tokyo. He's beaten the number 2, the number 3 runner in the world.
Yeah.
And so he's one of the favorites. I mean, at least for a medal.
Yeah. Well, and then I heard he sprained an ankle.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, or you know the specifics of that?
Well, I know the specifics. They were running in Nietzsche Gardens, and there was a hole there had a tree, and he stepped in the hole, sprained his ankle badly.
How many days before the race?
Oh,
3
or 4.
Okay.
Could have been 4, but 3 or 4. So when I got over there and I went up there, the doctors were working on the ankle. He says, you can't run. You've got a torn ligament. You can't run. He says, but I would like to step on the track, before 90,000 people just to feel it. But you can't run with a torn ligament. I know, but I'd like to at least step on the track. Okay. And so that's just kind of a fun thing, too. I says, Jerry, this is before.
Okay.
I said to Jerry, Billy was there, and he was his roommate. I says, who do we need to think about? We got to think about Ivanov, Dudov, and
Gamudi,
and
Clarke.
And Clarke. And who else? Oh, Coach. You missed, I think, the guy that's going to win the whole enchilada. Billy Mills. And Billy's there. I felt like an idiot because I should have included Billy. And what does he do? He wins it.
So Lindgren goes in the race, and he leads it for a while.
For a little bit, yeah.
And runs courageously, but he ends up 9th place.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes one of the most famous, at least for Americans, races of all time.
So
Billy wins it.
So Billy wins it. You're in the stands.
With his wife.
With Pat.
Yeah.
Patty Mills.
And I leave her. And Lee and I go to the up. And this is a neat story.
We're going to hear it. We want to hear it, Tracy.
God, this is so neat. So Lee and I took off and went into their room. And Billy still got the medal on. And I couldn't stand it. I just picked Billy up and spun him around. And I said, Billy, that's the most amazing example of athleticism I've ever seen in my life. And you know what he said? I proved one thing, Coach. I'm the second best runner in the world. He'd just broken the world's record. And he'd beaten everybody. And yet he had enough concern and love for Jerry and me to say, I'm the second best. And in that moment, he grew about 6 feet.
Wow.
Because how could you be so beautifully humble at your moment of glory. Now that takes a real man.
That's totally inspirational. That's big.
Huge.
And we've all met Billy in this room. So we know how cool he is and how gracious he is and how
Two good words.
motivational he is.
Coolly gracious.
Oh my gosh. And Jerry was so nice about rolling his ankle that he could help Billy become an iconic human being.
And look what he's done for the Indians.
Yes, what he's done for his people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And inspirational for all runners, for that matter.
And for all who knew him, including me.
So, Tracy, we only have like a couple minutes left here. Your story goes beyond just Jerry Lindgren and those stories, but over the years, you've also influenced a lot of high school runners up until even today in programs throughout the greater Spokane League and surrounding area. North Central High School, one of the dominant teams in America. Your role?
Yeah, I was there. I'm Grandpa Coach, which is kind of neat to be around those kids.
Well, he was
win year after year after year after year.
He was a full assistant when I was the head coach and for the track team for 13 years. And so I did a smart thing and hired my dad for $200 to be an assistant. And he worked with pole vaulters and hurdlers and so forth. But in the cross country season, and then we had kind of like his track team, had no success, and then ended up building success later. But he worked as an inspirational role there in workouts and there at meets and so forth, and giving advice to the head coach in cross country for years and years and years. And the kids looked to him. He would, like Pat had done, would have him come and speak, and he was there at workouts. And then when the team, especially when the Nike Nationals started and our team started qualifying, my dad was the one who John Knight would have work with the team postseason because he couldn't work out. So my dad was running the workouts and taking the kids to nationals. And so
kids did well.
So in addition to everything else, they ended up winning a national championship with him.
With my poor assistants.
And John Knight, who was a Ferris Saxon grad, who was the coach, and you were inspiration. I think we're going to have to get ready to close it down. I mean, like I said, we could go on and on and on because we could talk about San Jose State. We could talk about Bloomsday. We could talk about we could talk about the people going up to the orchard at Walters Ranch. Yeah. But we got to go, and we want to thank Tracy and his son Kelly for being here in our third podcast on, again, Footprints in the Sand Spokane running scene. Thank you.